In this episode of SENSimilla, we'll be talking to a mom, an owner of a long-running yoga business, and an author. They all happen to be the same person. Author of Weed Mom, the Canna-Curious Woman's Guide to Healthier Relaxation, Happier Parenting, and Chilling the F Out. Our guest today is the winner of the best cannabis book in the 2021 Women in Cannabis Expo. Congratulations, you did it. Danielle Simone Brand, thank you for joining us. Welcome to SENSimilla.
Oh, thank you so much, Will. It's a pleasure.
No, it's all my pleasure. I've been introduced to so many people through Diana from Your Highness podcast. She's just basically booked a whole season for me. She's like, here, meet all these people. They're all great. And they all are great.
She knows a lot of people. I'm really grateful to know her.
She's networked to the teeth. So I want to start off easy. I want to talk about the Upper Valley of New Hampshire.
Okay.
You can learn a lot about a person by where they dined. Were you more of a Louie Louie's fan, or did you go to Molly's Balloon?
That's hilarious. Molly's, actually. That was my favorite spot. Also the Indian place.
Ah.
Yeah,
well, I don't want to pull the curtain back, but Louie Louie's and Molly's was basically the same restaurant, owned by the same family. They also had a third one, a steakhouse somewhere. I can't remember the name of it. You're probably wondering how the hell. So I'm calling you from Vermont.
Yes.
We're just up the road from the Upper Valley, just up the road from Dartmouth, where you went to school. I also went to school in the Upper Valley. I went to high school in the Upper Valley before I moved over the border to Vermont. So you've lived all over the place. You've called Hawaii home, San Diego. You're currently in Boise, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right. And some other places in between, Washington, D.C. for a while. Actually, I went over the border and lived in Norwich, Vermont for a little bit too, which was
oh my goodness.
Great
experience. What the hell brought you over here? Why were you in the Upper Valley?
Well, okay, so little Hawaii girl, I thought I loved cold weather and everything New England. I actually wrote in my I wrote in my high school yearbook that cold weather was one of my passions, and everybody laughs at me now because I've lived in cold places, and they're like, "No, this is not your passion."
No, it is not. That's hilarious. Yeah, boy, were you wrong.
Yeah, well, grass is greener, right?
Yeah, for sure. And the thing about the Upper Valley and kind of even all the way up to Burlington, where I'm at, is that it's like the opposite of Alaska. There comes a point in the late fall where the sun just kind of goes away and doesn't come back until the middle of or late May, basically. So yeah, the allure of skiing in the East and learning how to ice skate down a mountain, I could see that being attractive from Hawaii. Well, we're happy to have you here, even if it was just for a short period of time.
Yeah, don't forget those vitamin D supplements.
Oh my God. And all my ring lights. They're always on.
That's right.
Yoga seems to be a pretty dominant force in your life. Just scrolling through LinkedIn and hearing you interviewed on past podcasts. Can you talk a little bit about where yoga came from, why it's so important to you?
So actually, I found it in my first year at Dartmouth like I said, little Hawaii girl, and just feeling pretty lost and pretty, freezing my butt off. And, culturally just not feeling like I fit into to Dartmouth, to be honest. I didn't grow up with a lot of privilege. I just sort of, happened to get in and happened to get a scholarship. And I was actually, I felt sort of out of place there. Like, gosh, do I really belong? And, all those things that many of us are thinking about at that period of time, 17, 18 years old, trying to figure ourselves out.
Fish out of water.
Yeah.
A fish out of water at an Ivy League school on the other side of the planet from where you grew up. I would say that's, not that surprising.
Not that surprising. So, yoga felt like coming home, honestly. The first time I went to a yoga class in Hanover, it was this like candlelit place full of blankets and like coziness. And I was just like, oh gosh, I'm home. I'm breathing. I feel like alive. And so it just from there, I fell in love with it and continued. And I actually did all my training at Kripalu, which is up in Massachusetts, or down from where you are.
And over from where you are.
Yes, exactly. So I definitely like my yogic roots are pretty New England based, and I
Yeah.
feel like, yeah, I feel like a strong pull there. And honestly, it's just been this practice that has been an anchor in my life, through moving a billion times and
Yeah.
changing careers a few times and having kids and having, just sort of the contemporary life that includes a lot of change. Yoga has really anchored me through all of that. And it's not just the physical practice, but it's the mental practice, the discipline, the mindfulness, the breathing, coming back to that practice really consistently is something that has given me immeasurable benefit.
Yeah, totally. And it's for sure like one of those skills that, as you said, like you bounced from place to place. And it's one of those skills that, if you land in a new place and you put in a little bit of, legwork to embed yourself in the community, you can, teach yoga pretty much anywhere, even obviously even remotely. But was there a time when you knew you kind of wanted to maybe turn it into a profession? Like was there a sort of
Yeah,
a
yeah,
light
that
bulb that went
moment.
off? Yeah.
That moment, funny enough, was after I finished grad school for something else,
Uh-huh.
for international peace and conflict resolution in DC. And I had
Oh, we need
started
that in the world.
Yes, we do. And I had started a club in my graduate school at American University in DC, just to
Hmm.
practice together, a collective. I called it the Yoga Collective because I wanted to practice. I couldn't afford classes at the time, and I just wanted a community. And so, we gathered weekly, and I ended up kind of guiding or leading that community. And then once I graduated from my master's program and was working in the field of international conflict resolution, working in policy, working in academia, feeling like really internally stressed
Yeah,
and
I
pulled in
bet.
different directions, and like the field itself was very conflictual.
Yeah,
And so,
definitely.
yoga, yeah, right. So yoga just like pulled me in, and I started teaching to my, first my fellow students, and then professors started coming, and then I started teaching in workplaces all around DC. And honestly, I did not expect it. I thought like I'm going to be in policy, I'm going to be an academic, this is my path. And yoga just opened itself up to me. People kept literally calling me and saying, "Can you come teach a class here? Can you go over there and teach them about mindfulness?" And, so it just kind of unfolded for me. And I found it much more fulfilling than what I had been doing. Even though, like it's so important. People need to work on policy and research and academia and all these things. But, I wanted to support them, those peacemakers and peace builders in their own, personal and internal peace.
That's interesting that you found that, and this is something I love to talk. I did a podcast a while ago with a client of mine who runs a business, and he said this thing that was just so, at the time, it it hit me hard, but the more I think about it, the more it just rings true, which was like, people say, do what you love, you won't work a day in your life. But no, do what you are good at, and then maybe try to incorporate the thing that you love. So
Mm.
you went into this thing thinking you were going to be a policymaker, maybe be a bureaucrat or an elected official, whatever, like try to enact policy. But you found that actually this thing that you were already good at, you could apply to, and hopefully, win in both ways. You're building a business, teaching yoga, but maybe you're improving the lives of those bureaucrats. You're like helping them create better policy,
I
because
hope
they're not as
so.
stressed out. Yeah, let's put it on you. You take the credit.
I hope so. I ended up working with a lot of medical policy folks actually in DC, and like Medicaid analysts and things like that. And those people are stressed AF. So
Yeah.
I was happy to bring just like, an hour of calm, an hour of setting aside all the to-dos, all the busyness. And I kind of felt like a washing machine sometimes. Like people would come
How do you
in
mean?
like, well, because people would come into my class like full of their stress and full of their thoughts and
Oh,
full of
yeah.
their anxieties and their body all tense. And I just, and in the class, we just sort of scrub
Hmm.
that out
Yeah.
slowly,
Rinse and repeat.
rinse and repeat. But then, of
Yeah,
course,
yeah.
it piles back on as soon as they get out.
Yeah, for sure. But if you can't like if you're just building on top of it, it's, and it never gets washed away, these people aren't
Totally.
going to have productive careers, or for sure not happy lives. So, I mean, it kind of sounds like your yoga business almost figured itself out in a lot of ways, just in terms of like how you marketed yourself. Can you talk a little bit more about that and building it in the early days? Like, you had some word of mouth, you were getting referrals from, these other places. Like, how did you kind of capitalize on that? How did you snowball that into something that you felt like was maybe a career?
Yeah, this was like, first of all, I have never been a marketer. And now that I have a book out, it's like I am a fish out of water in the marketing
Yeah.
space. I'm doing my best. It's fun. It's interesting. But I
Oh,
honestly
I'm
wasn't.
definitely going to ask you about how you marketed your book. So like
Okay.
we're gonna get. I want to this trajectory of kind of like building a business, learning how to market yourself there, and then doing something completely different, and then applying what you've learned and maybe like the good and the bad to that. We're gonna get there. I think it's fascinating. But sorry,
Okay,
I
you're
didn't
the
mean
first.
to.
That's okay. You're the first interviewer who's actually gone to this depth with me about, my yoga and my sort of my life before the book. So I appreciate that. It's actually kind of interesting to think about sort of how, the narrative of our
How'd
lives,
you
right?
get
How we got
here? You
there. How
gotta,
did we get
yeah,
here?
you gotta look in the mirror and see where you came from, or else you're just gonna keep, I don't want to paint it negatively, but you're gonna keep making the same mistakes, or you're gonna keep making, you're not going to evolve. So I think it's fascinating to see how a person evolves from, a fish out of water kid who's trying to start a yoga business into where you're at now, which is, an award-winning author.
Awesome. Well, okay. So, honestly, the way that I built that business was word of mouth, like you said. And the
Yeah.
more I taught, the more people asked me to teach. And then, of course, I think that what helped was communications and blogging as well, having a theme to my classes that actually like unified the whole week worth of classes that I was teaching, whether that
What
was,
years are we talking? So like what kind of, I mean, you're talking about, you obviously had a website, you were blogging, but what other kind of platforms existed at that point that you felt you fit on?
So 2005 is when I graduated from grad school, and I started teaching yoga in earnestly probably 2006. And then I did that until, let's see, until we left in 2012. I taught full time. And so, yeah, it was basically just like a junky little website. It wasn't,
Yeah.
I wasn't connected to anything big. I don't think it was even, a video blog or anything like that. It was just my website with the theme that I would be doing that week, and then my email list. Of course, I had an email list because
Yeah.
all these different workplace classes I was doing, I had to coordinate with everyone in the class and communicate about schedules and all that stuff. So having a theme really does help as a yoga teacher, something that unifies message that you're bringing, because it's not just about moving your body and breathing deeply. Like, those are great and important things, and if that's all you get out of it, fine, wonderful. But there's the cultivation of of a yogic philosophy, right? An approach to life, a way of approaching oneself and others and the world, recognizing the light within, recognizing the light within other people, all beings. So these are themes that I want to connect, and I want to bring it to the class, as well as like help encourage people to think about that in their everyday lives. So I think that sort of kind of unity of messaging is really, really helpful.
Okay, this is interesting to me. So like
Yeah.
this is like a huge stressor for me, and luckily like I've grown out of having to like manage the day-to-day of like creation of we're creating content right now, but I have a team now that is able to write blogs, they manage our email list, they do all this, but the emotion, just the brain power that I'd have to put into, and now my team has to put into, like figuring out, okay, and usually we do this bi-weekly sort of thing, but like, what is the theme of this week or this month? What service are we looking, or like what, and obviously we're cannabis, so we're trying to apply this theory of just constantly churning out content and figuring out different angles to approach a lot of the same things. And talk to multiple segments of audiences is like drove me crazy. So I'm curious, if was that the approach you took? Like, here's the theme of, when you say theme, you mean like this month we're focused on vinyasa or like whatever, and then kind of figuring out how to pull in maybe some of the social aspects of what you do, like the spiritual aspects of what you do, and then obviously like the health benefits of what you do. I'm curious how.
Yeah,
about that.
exactly. So, for instance, a theme in yoga could be heart opening, which goes along with the physical action of back bends, right? So you can teach a series. If I were doing that for a week, I would teach a series that really worked up, really gradually to a bigger back bend, right? With the option of getting to maybe wheel pose or something like that. All throughout, there would be, either quotes or poetry or just like little bits that would encourage people to think about the emotional aspects of heart opening, right? As well as the
Hmm.
physical aspects, so you kind of break down the anatomy and physiology, and then you talk about sort of the emotional kind of correlation to that. So that would be an
Hmm.
example of a theme where I'd, then bring in, thoughts from other teachers, quotes, poems, ideas that sort of all feed that. Does that make sense?
Interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, absolutely. You have, it's hard to kind of pop your own bubble and understand not only are there, do I as a business owner have to be able to communicate lots of similar things in many different ways, but I also now need to like get that message out there and make sure it's understood and not like kind of beating a dead horse, so to speak. Um,
Yes. Well, in cannabis, I feel that very strongly because we do have to repeat ourselves a lot. There's
yeah.
still a lot of folks who don't know, some of these basic things. So yeah, finding new ways or new media to talk about similar topics or similar subjects. I think that's something we're all looking for.
Yeah, definitely. Um, Now I'm curious. So like you were creating content for your blog, you know, back in 2005, all the way through, you were building content, written content. Where did actual authorship come from? How did you know that maybe being a writer, exercising this particular skill was something you wanted to go to investigate more?
Well, that's another thing that's been with me for actually a really long time, probably longer than yoga. As a little kid, in addition to wanting to be a female Indiana Jones, I also wanted to be a writer.
Great. I also wanted to be a female Indiana Jones.
Excellent. There should be more. um, so, and I remember writing my first like very, very long-winded short story in fourth grade and reading it in front of the class and my teacher encouraging me and also saying, this is getting a bit long after maybe 20
Yeah,
minutes. So
that's so funny.
so it was with me for a long time. I wrote for, our literary magazine in high school. I wrote for a newspaper in college. And then my first job out of college was as an editor, quote unquote, for a .com in the new boom.
Mhm.
This was the year 2000. I moved to San Francisco after graduating from Dartmouth and got a job as an editor in a .com. It was a little bit of writing, a lot of input and like, data entry sort of thing. So I didn't enjoy that too much. But the idea being that writing, editing, working with words, working with language. I went to France for my senior year of high school. We glossed over that, but working with words and language has always been of interest to me, of deep interest to me. And my different jobs, I've woven it through, whether it was in academia and
Mhm.
policy, of course, tons of writing, or just as a yoga teacher, I found a way to to keep that muscle alive. And then, also I will say that traveling extensively in my early 20s through Southeast Asia and some other places, some of that alone really facilitated my sort of like autobiographical writing, the sense of like I'm going through experiences, writing about them, interacting, processing that through text and word.
Yeah,
So yeah, and all that kind of comes together in my book because there's that like narrative, personal element to it and the reported side of it. Yeah.
totally. So before we get to the book specifically, I do want to talk about kind of um because it's not like you've left your yoga business behind and just started a whole new chapter. You're still doing it, and also you've morphed in this, you know, this new aspect of writing, a little long form writing. Um, was there not, obviously you had kids, so I'm sure that impacted writing this particular book, but did you feel that there was a book in you like for a while before this one happened?
Oh my gosh, you're teasing out all these things. Okay, so yes, I wrote an entire book before I wrote this book.
Ah, so I
It
have a couple
is,
friends who are authors, and
yeah.
like, it's, I don't know why, but it's a similar thread I find between all of them, which is like not the skill of actually writing, but which is a skill, like for sure being able to like, syntax and coherent thoughts and grammar, like all that stuff's great. But writing a book is not necessarily that. That's the job for the editor. But writing a book is like a whole thing. And usually that's not unusual that you wrote a book before you wrote your book. I feel like at least more than half of the people I've talked to have done that. Or at least
Totally.
been like, I have an outline for this book, and that book never gets written. They write the book they're supposed to write.
I have an entire manuscript, an entire book proposal. I worked, really hard trying to get an agent, but, it taught me how to write the second book. So, I don't regret it. It's actually my first book, which is not a book, it's just a manuscript, is
Sure.
a memoir about leaving Washington, D.C. with our 2-year-old son. And I was pregnant with our daughter. We moved to Colorado, about 36 acres in a very remote place, and attempted to homestead and grow all our own everything.
Yep.
And we failed spectacularly. So that was that story.
Why did you fail? I mean, I can imagine why. Like, that sounds like a nightmare to me.
Uh-huh.
I am very much a 4-star diva. Like, I need to be pampered. I am definitely not picking something from a garden. No.
It's good that you know
And I
that.
live in Vermont. Like, I am not, I'm a bad Vermonter.
It's such a crunchy place.
It's such a crunchy place, and I am not crunchy. I mean, maybe a little bit, but so I'm curious, like, was this just some, I mean, I'm married, so I have these kind of pipe dream conversations with my wife. Like, what if we lived in Sedona? Like
Yeah.
those kinds of, how did that happen? Who convinced who?
Oh, it was all me.
Okay. Fair.
I dragged my husband out of DC, and where he actually was done with it too, but I think he enjoyed
it's a tough place
living.
to be.
It is, but he enjoyed it more than I did. I think that, it fed his intellect in a really, a way that was sustaining for a while. And for me, it was like it fed my intellect, and then it kind of drained me. We had our 2-year-old. We knew we were going to have we wanted to have a second kid, and I just felt like this is not the lifestyle I want to raise our kids in. This like super frenetic, urban, traffic filled, super, scheduled and expensive life. Right.
Yep.
So, I had these fantasies of, don't we all, right? Escape fantasies of some sort or another. And mine happened to coalesce around, environmentalism, growing food, raising our children in a non-materialistic environment. I think that was a big part of it. I saw just this like really insidious pull of advertising and TV and toys. And, anytime I would just go to a store with my little son, I just felt like, his brain is being shaped by all this stuff around him that I didn't,
Totally.
So I wanted to control more of the influences. I'm a more mature parent now. Like, I get it. Like, you can't control everything. You can, but I had this sort of like purity ideal, I guess, of like how we would live.
Your intentions were right on. Like, there's also the reality of like, living as if you're in the 1800s. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And we just weren't prepared for that. So the elevation, 7,000 feet, bad choice if you want to grow most of your own food.
Yeah. Or if you want to be pregnant, right?
Or if you want to be pregnant and be able to breathe at the same time. Yeah.
Yep.
So there's that. And it was just so isolating. I think the main thing that drove us away is that we realized we needed community. And that's something that I think it's a theme of my life, is searching for that place and that home and that group of people that feels really, like home. And I think that's just something that is a theme of my life, and I've always kind of played with.
I can totally relate to that, and not feeling like, yeah, absolutely. And maybe even a little bit of the opposite of that. Well, for me, that feeling is, I'm going to be my own shrink. That feeling is derived from maybe never feeling like I was, I belonged, right? Like, I never felt like I was quite part of this team. Like, I was friends with everybody in high school, as opposed to like my one clique. You know what I mean? Like, I was a little too all over the place and wasn't never too sure where I fit in. And I think like, if you can relate to that, being like, okay, well, I'll make my own clique, like I'll start a family and we'll live on this commune. We'll be homesteaders. That makes total sense. For me, it was starting a company. It was like, okay, which is the same thing, right? It's like, okay, I'm going to make my own island. I'm going to live on my own island, and I can, whoever I want to come in, and I can hire them and they can work here. And uh, this is something I can control. I think I probably have come to the same conclusion that you did with homesteading, which is there is no control. You're fucked either way. Like it doesn't matter what you do.
Yeah, here.
Yeah. You're still,
I've learned it.
Yeah. You're still a little piece of carbon on a rock floating, hurtling through space. Like you don't have control.
You don't. But community and doing something that you're good at and that you love, like you mentioned earlier, goes a long way, I think, for like human satisfaction and happiness. But yeah, we are ultimately still the human condition, aren't we?
Yeah, 100%. What was the straw that broke the camel's back with the homestead?
Oh God. Okay.
Like,
So,
yeah.
okay. So like I said, I was pregnant, drove home this long way up the mountain, swerve, the sheer cliffs on one side,
Yeah.
the tiny roads of thinking like, oh my gosh, winter is coming. And oh my gosh, I'm pregnant. I got to our house. My husband didn't see the car come up the driveway, thought it was a bear in the garage because there were
Pulled a
bears
gun on you.
literally everywhere and that. Yep. I mean, he's holding the gun, came to the garage. Here I am pulling our sleeping 2-year-old out, and we're like, what the hell are we doing? We're not cut out for this.
That's a breaking point. I'm sure you both had this, I'm sure you were both like, that's it.
We're like, we're out.
That was a fun experiment. I need a Target and Starbucks now.
Exactly. And I still have some of those ideals, but it's more tempered now. I get you need a village. It's the rare person or family who can just do it all alone. And especially if you don't have that background, if you come from the city, the suburbs, places of comfort.
It's not like you were a Boy Scout growing up.
No.
No. So, I was a Boy Scout growing up, and still count me out.
Well, at least I mean, it's good to know yourself.
For sure. I mean, maybe in my 20s, maybe when I was, the age that you were, I maybe would have thought about it. But even, the small house, the tiny house thing, like maybe was a 30-second conversation back when those things were trendy, that was a 10-second conversation my wife and I had. Well, should we just no, like we're both giant people. There's no way. I'm 6'3" and I weigh, almost 300 pounds. There's not a chance. Not a chance.
Doesn't sound fun. I mean, there are so many interesting ways of living these days, and it is appealing, absolutely, to think about.
Sure.
I mean, yeah, maybe not the tiny home, but the geodesic dome.
Cool.
Totally.
Yeah, all cool. You know what? I bet. Do you still own the property?
No.
I was gonna say it's nice maybe to go there for a weekend or a week at a time. To know it's there and at least be able to visit it, but not have to worry about your husband thinking you're a bear.
We sold it to some apocalyptic preppers, so I'm sure they're happy.
there's no shortage of them in Colorado.
I'm sure they're very happy up there.
That's where they all go. I've heard in past interviews cannabis wasn't the biggest part of your life. You had a pretty normal relationship with it growing up, gave it a try. Can you talk a little bit about that and why the 180?
Yeah, it's a total 180, and I do describe it in the first chapter of the book. For people who haven't read it, I talk about dropping my husband off at rehab first. That's in the very first chapter, and he had to stop consuming cannabis. So that's a very interesting, strange part of our story. I went from, like you said, having a pretty indifferent relationship with it growing up to meeting and falling in love with somebody who was a big stoner at the time, and not really loving that aspect of him, but also feeling like, okay, it's just part of who he is. He's creative, he's funny, he's whatever, weed is part of that. But over time, we got married kind of young, I was 24. And over time, moved, went to grad school, started our lives. I started to notice that he was leaning on it a lot. He was using cannabis for mental health in a way that I think can be really adaptive and healthy. And it can also turn on a person if they're not also using a wide array of other tools, right? Of other ways to be healthy. Talk therapy. In some cases, people do need medication in addition to cannabis, all sorts of different things. So because of that, I just thought, it's not that healthy. It's not that helpful. I didn't think it was a wellness tool. Like a wellness tool was the furthest from my mind, right?
Yeah, it's a crutch.
Yeah, crutch is what I thought. Exactly. And even in those years, like I would occasionally smoke with my husband, but again, I didn't have a relationship with the plant and I didn't understand it. I didn't know why am I like giggly and happy sometimes,
Yeah.
or like exhausted and just want to go to sleep other times?
Yeah.
What is this substance? It doesn't make sense to me. Of course, I didn't get terpenes, I didn't get cannabinoids, I didn't get, like modes of delivery, all those things. And so, I went from really being indifferent to starting to dislike the plant. And by the time my husband decided he needed to quit cannabis altogether and he wanted to go to a residential program just to recalibrate, be away from his routines and all that stuff, have intensive therapy, all those things. I was at the same time transitioning in my career to freelance writing. So we've talked about, I came from grad school and academia and went through health and wellness and yoga. And then freelance writing was really around 2016, 2017. I was starting to get into it. And lo and behold, everybody wanted to learn about cannabis, as they still do. Right. So I was finding a call for pitches from lots of editors, like, basic stuff, explain your CBD and THC, or cultural stuff, parents and cannabis. And that's something that I eventually gravitated towards, of course. I think my very first freelance article on cannabis was talking to parents, actually. So, I sort of entered in that way and I continued. But, so I started learning about cannabis before I even cared that much about it, or actually when I kind of didn't like it. But the truth is, I fell in love because it's interesting,
Yeah.
It really is. Yeah. Bringing together all these different things, science and the health and wellness and self-care piece that yoga brings. Of course, business, policy, social justice, the environment, all these things that I actually really care about. And then legal weed was coming to California. We voted in 2016 in that fateful election. And then in 2018, January is when our market opened. And I said, you know what? It's legal now. I'm an adult. I'm not pregnant. I'm not breastfeeding anymore. I'm going to give this an adult try. Yep. Yeah. So I tell that story in my book of just, ordering low dose vape, feeling really cautious, not sure at all how I should proceed. And then, taking a little bit, inhaling a little bit, and having a beautiful experience and feeling like I came
was
home.
This market research though? Were you like doing research for like, all the freelance writing you were doing, or was it a combination of maybe that, but also like this thing's legal now? I think, I'm not a big fan of wine, like whatever people lean on to sort of wind down their day or wind up their day, whatever. It just wasn't in your bag.
It was like a simultaneous thing, I think, learning about it from this intellectual standpoint, realizing it was accessible to me and that, the stigmas were probably going to be lessening as legal cannabis was more available.
Sure.
And just, you got it. If you're writing about, for me, if I'm writing about something, I want to experience it. I am definitely a hands-on person. And also I'll say this too, interviewing folks for those first couple of articles and realizing that it actually helps people in a lot of really real ways, healthy ways, adaptive ways that, like are different from what I was noticing with my husband. So that, that gave me the sense of, okay, that there's more to it.
For sure. I think like anything and pretty much everything consumable, like there's an opportunity for it to be exploited by people for good or bad reasons. I guess if it's being exploited, it's bad, but you can lean on food, whatever it is, food, drugs, alcohol, cigarettes, exercise, even good things too. All these things can in excess not be great for you, but if planned and with some thought, like these are all normal things that can actually help you, especially cannabis. I mean, obviously.
obviously. And, I wish I had understood that earlier. Like, I really did not get it as a health and wellness tool until I started interviewing other women, actually, lots of women telling me how much it helped them with, with sleep, with pain, with mood, with anxiety, with, parenting, the stresses of parenting, and also just like the tapping into the fun parts of parenting too. Like, it's not just taking away the bad, but
Sure.
also, enhancing the way that we're able to be present with our kids. So, all those things really did interest me. They piqued my interest. And then when I had my first experience and I realized, okay, first of all, this is a dose dependent experience. I'm not going to, take a small puff of this vape pen and then get so insanely high that I can't think or do anything. It's like, right, just understanding, okay, like how to self-administer, how to calibrate, how to dose in a sane way. It made all the difference to me.
I can imagine. So going back to some of so cannabis is starting to emerge into your life with a little more self-acceptance than maybe it had in the past. You're starting to do this freelance thing. You're getting more offers to do articles specifically about cannabis. How fucked up has Dare made this country?
Oh my God.
And
That's
here's
a
what
great
I'm asking.
question.
Here's why I'm asking is because you've interviewed all these people.
Mhm.
We'll get to the specifics of the book in a moment, but you wrote this whole book about being a Canna-mom. We're raised by we're a generation of Dare kids raised by a generation of baby boomers who are probably more negatively impacted by Nixon than we were by Nancy Reagan, but still, like,
Mhm. Mhm.
this stuff was in our psyche since we were little babies. So I'm
Yep.
curious, like, in going through this article, and I think there may be a little bit of self-reflection on that too, like, coming out of the Canna-mom closet, so to speak. I'm curious kind of what your take on, and you've got some history doing this, like you've been talking to people since 2016 on this, like how screwed up are we and how much work is left to be done?
I'd say very. We're pretty screwed up. You know, Here's an interesting thing. I wrote this book thinking that mainstream Canna curious moms might be most interested in it. And there are many of those readers. But what I found more is that existing Canna moms who knew the plant was helping them, but felt so much shame and stigma because of the way we were raised
Yep.
around the plant, were able to like feel more empowered, more confident in their choices after reading the book. And that's the majority of people that I hear from. Not so much, hey, I tried cannabis for the first time after reading your book. More, this is something that helps me. And I've been in the closet about it for a long time. Now I started to talk to my, whatever, spouse, parents, children, etc. So, I think that even among people, basically the stigma is so strong that even among people who know there's benefit from the plant, there is still that shame and that hiding. And some of that obviously is if you're in a prohib state, you're going to hide just to protect yourself and to protect your children and your custody situation and all those things. But I also do find a lot of room for hope. I do think that we're changing our attitudes, as a whole, mainstream. If you look at Gallup polls, first of all, most people think that cannabis should be legal, right?
Yep. Yeah.
And most people think that its benefits are, a majority think that its benefits are more positive than negative on consumers. So I think those are really good indications. But when it, like the smell is very stigmatized, right? The smell of cannabis smoke still. Someone showing up to an event or a kid's event smelling loud, that's not so okay,
Yeah.
So there's a lot of room to grow, and certainly a lot of room for policy to catch up when it comes to well, first of all, everywhere, everything. Expunge, free the people, legalize, decriminalize, like all those things still need to happen. But I do think that we're in a state of progress right now when it comes to the plant. I'm encouraged.
Good. I mean, your journey started in, some might argue, the most legal of states. California's had a medical program since like 98 or something like that.
A6, yeah.
Yeah. And now you live in Idaho, which is not legal for sure, highly conservative in at least its political, views of cannabis. How do you balance that?
Yeah, don't tell anybody I live in Idaho. I'm just kidding.
We'll beep it out.
I'm kidding. It's an interesting place to be. Like, I wrote the book proposal while living in San Diego for Weed Mom, and then did not get the deal until we moved here. And I had no idea I was going to get the book deal. Like, as you've talked to other authors, like, it's never a given.
Yeah.
So I found myself in an odd situation of having just moved to a prohibition state, writing a book about cannabis. And then, of course, the pandemic started like right after I got the book deal. So it was a really odd and interesting time. Idaho is an interesting place in regards to cannabis. There is a medical legalized movement, a signature gathering movement that I've been a part of the whole time I've been here. It was really hard to get signatures during the pandemic, obviously. We didn't meet the requirements to get on the ballot this year. And there isn't even a, adult use movement here yet. It's just medical at this point. Or there's also there was a decriminalized petition that was just about making it legal for folks to go across the border to Oregon, which they do en masse, and drive it back. So,
there's plenty of weed in Oregon.
Yeah, there's enough to go around.
Help them out.
Exactly. And so like I am cautious when I meet new people on the ground, obviously, especially if connected to my kids' school. Sure. But the word tends to get out eventually. Our names are if someone Googles your name these days, they can find information about you right away. So I find that the conversation is still happening even here. It's less like front and center, but it's happening. For instance, last week, I taught yoga at a benefit for my kids' school that was at the Idaho Shakespeare Festival, actually. And it was a wine tasting, a chocolate tasting, and a yoga event. And I didn't partake in the wine tasting because I don't really enjoy alcohol that much anymore. But, while the other moms were drinking and we were all chatting, we just had the yoga practice and everybody was relaxed, cannabis came up in the conversation at least 3 or 4 times, different moments, different people, in the evening. And I realized that even in a place like Idaho, even in a place, of very conservative outward politics, there is interest, there's more openness, there are easier ways to have the conversation too. Like, I always start talking about CBD before. Yeah, exactly. So it's a weird, and Idaho is not forever home for us, just like, we're Rolling Stones, I guess.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the book.
Yeah.
Weed Mom. Where did the inspiration hit for the book? That was not an intended pun.
Where did it hit? Yeah, weed is full of the great puns, huh? So, yeah.
And as a cannabis marketer, let me tell you, like, I hear.
Do you hate them?
I hate them. And I hear them all, and they are all used professionally, and none of them are good.
Sometimes you just can't avoid it, though. You just got to embrace it.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, I don't have control. I have no control. So bring on the puns.
People are gonna weed. Yep, people are gonna weed. Weed punners are gonna weed pun.
Yeah, for sure. So you'd kind of been reintroduced to cannabis at this point. You're a mom, you became a mom. How did the inspiration for this outline before it was a book? Where did it come from?
So it came because I was primarily freelancing about cannabis and parenting, but separately. I was primarily I had 2 beats. And once in a while, I would be asked to write some kind of crossover, like talking to kids about cannabis or precautions to take if you're a parent who consumes, is it okay to be a parent who consumes? Just, very basic stuff like that. And I was in a writers group in San Diego. We're living in San Diego at the time. And my writers group said, first of all, they started coming to me with all of their questions and sending their friends and their,
you became an expert.
Their network to me for answering questions. People started asking me to go to the dispensary with them. People started asking me to, recommend a strain for XYZ. Of course, that's how it goes. And I just realized, okay, there's hunger for this information, particularly among moms.
So
like
funny.
Some of them, were smokers back in college and then gave it up because they were supposed to, because they became an adult and a parent and all that. Some people never stopped, but they didn't have any familiarity with the legal marketplace, and they, wanted to know about this like plethora of new products and offerings and all that stuff. And then some people were just struggling with the stigma. So, I just realized there's a real need for this. People want this information, and specifically, I knew that there wasn't a book targeted to moms like in this moment. And it's not just about like how to consume. Like I wanted to really cover like the cultural background of this moment. Like everything's changing, laws are changing, and attitudes are changing, albeit somewhat more slowly in some cases than we want.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to address that. Like, how do we talk about this now that it's okay, sort of?
So the topic of fear and shame, like those are things that I love talking about on this podcast, because it's a big part. We look at it through the lens of entrepreneurship and, taking chances and,
Mhm.
learning how to not listen to the voices in your head that tell you, you suck or you shouldn't do the thing that, your heart wants you to do.
Yeah.
This exists in every facet of our lives, especially parenthood, I would imagine.
Mhm.
So I'm kind of wondering, like, was there any anxiety in writing this book? And let me clarify that. I don't mean like I've got this deadline or I need to finish this chapter or whatever, but something that always comes up in almost every conversation is this thing, imposter syndrome. So like
Mhm.
feeling like I'm a fake authority in this industry that I'm in, or like, should I actually be like, why are these people listening to me? That sort of thing. And I know that this probably exists to an exponential level when it comes to like the industry of parenthood, or however you want to define that.
Mhm.
Um, so I'm kind of curious about this. So let me be even a little more specific. My brothers are I don't have kids, but both my brothers are parents, and one of my younger brother is, he's like, the internet makes me feel like a shitty parent constantly,
Mhm.
because I'm on these Facebook groups or whatever, and everybody is an expert. And there's toxicity sometimes in these parent groups, because they're, telling another parent how stupid their methods are or whatever. I'm curious if this is something that you can relate to, and whether or not how you defeated that. So you are a parent,
Mhm.
you are a writer, you are,
Mhm.
a
Mhm.
an expert in your field. You wrote a book. How do you deal with kind of that whole thing?
Oh my gosh, that is such a great question, and not one that I've ever been asked.
Thanks.
So let me think. I am writing about parenting, and yet I'm not an expert. I don't have a methodology. I don't have, like a PhD in counseling psychology and, child psychology or any of that stuff. And I'm not okay. So I think that the philosophy behind the book, the way that I come to terms with that, is that the philosophy behind the book is empowerment. What works for you? Like, I want women, moms in particular, to truly be able to consider what works for me and my family, not what does society expect of me, what are all of the responsibilities in my life, but like what actually really works for me, and in terms of my own cannabis consumption, in terms of my self-care, my ability to care for my family, all these different things. And I feel like not positing myself as someone with a method, but positing myself as someone who wants to cheerlead and empower you to figure out in your way. I think that's how I get around that. And of course, I
Mm-hmm.
have a perspective. My perspective is diversity, inclusiveness, progressiveness, like really being the kind of parent that shows up emotionally for your kids, because, is present, is not punitive, but like creates a collaborative environment. Those things are important to me. And I think I show that throughout my book. But my approach, I guess, is more modeling and saying how I do it instead of saying this is how you should.
That's interesting. This isn't a guide so much as it is a reflection.
That's so interesting. I think it is both, but it's not a guide in a prescriptive way. It's a guide in a like more philosophical way, I
Mm-hmm.
guess. Like, in that sort of larger project to become self-empowered, to, be a happy, healthy, self-realized parent, because I think that's imperative for our world. Like the more we as parents can actually show up for ourselves and for our kids, the better world we're going to have. We're going to just have kids who are emotionally more intelligent, who are more kind, who understand themselves better. So yeah, that's what it's all about to me. And it's not a method, but it is a philosophy. I guess that's how I'll say it.
Oh, great. I love that. What is
Yeah.
sort of the biggest, if there's one takeaway you're hoping moms, dads, whoever's reading this book, leaves, they close the book and they put it down and they're reflecting and they're like, what do you hope that message is?
It's honestly that it's if you as a parent can find a way to your health, happiness, peace, and ability to make an impact on the world, then your parenting will absolutely be more connected, more fun, more collaborative, and is better for the world. It's better for our kids. It's better for the future. I think that's it. It's like, be as healthy as you can. Can't use cannabis if that helps you. And, parent your kids with love. Like, it comes down to that for me. I'm a better parent with cannabis. Like, I feel that. And, it's a little tricky, I think, to say like cannabis makes me a better parent, but honestly, its inclusion in my life is a holistic application that does improve my life so much as a whole that my parenting is better.
Yeah, I totally understand that. I have like 5 more questions, but I feel like that's actually a great place to end the podcast. Like, that is such an important message. And I feel like, people forget that they need to give themselves a break. And I don't mean like using cannabis, but they need to sometimes remember that I need to take a step back and just be a human on this planet. And sometimes cannabis helps with that. I would especially think that being a parent, it's even harder to find that time to be reflective or to be patient or whatever it is, fill in the blank. So that's a beautiful spot. I'll maybe leave some of these other questions for a follow-up interview. I'm curious though, if there is another, it's been 2 years. You're still promoting this book. I imagine you'll never stop promoting this book. So what's next? What is there another book?
Maybe. Maybe. I'm still freelancing. So, I write for Women in Weed and Kind of Curious and a lot of these, women's oriented, Vanguard, women's oriented
Talking to Keisha later in the week.
Media out there. Excellent. That's wonderful. And I do freelance about some other things here and there. I have kind of delved into the psychedelic space as well. And I've been writing for Double Blind on a variety of psychedelics. So microdosing mama might be the next one. I don't know.
That's fun.
But for now, I do feel like there is such an intense learning curve for me when it comes to psychedelics, and cannabis is really like the spot where I still feel like I have more to learn. Absolutely. But I also feel like I have a good grasp and I can understand all the new information that comes at me. Whereas with psychedelics, it's like, whoa, tryptamine, what are we talking about? There's just a lot of terms, a lot of science that, I'm still familiarizing with.
It's very scientific.
Yeah.
It's a lot to wrap your head around. I mean, if you thought cannabinoids were complex, wait till you meet psychedelics.
Oh yeah.
Danielle Simone Brand, you've been an absolute pleasure to speak with. We will for sure put a link in the description for a place to buy the book. But let our listeners know where they can find out more about you and let us know what else you're up to.
Yeah. So my work is at DanielleSimoneBrand.com. I do try to keep it updated, but I don't always. I have a lot of podcasts and radio out there and a lot of interviews and a lot of articles too. And then you can also find me on Instagram at Danielle Simone Brand or at Weed Mom Book.
We will put those links in the description. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time. It has been an absolute pleasure speaking with you. Thank you for joining us for another episode of SENSimilla. I've been your host, Will Reed. We'll see you next time. Bye.